Hi, so we're here to do an installation to a flood barrier. This is how they arrive at the property, whether it's been on a pallet or courier. And if you've got multiple barriers, they are labelled just to help you identify where they're going. So at this property, we have a front door area. There are 2 boards for that one, and they're the side rails for the front door. We also have on this one a patio door area, which is round the back. That's the board, and they're the side rails for that. Easily marked so you can't get those wrong. Also double check and measure them when you go to put them in. I'll now unpackage them and show you when they're out of the packaging what components you get. Right, we've unpackaged the barriers from the cardboard. Tip on that, be careful if you're using the Stanley knife that you don't nick any of the seals or your fingers. So I'm going to just show you I've undone barriers for 2 openings here. So this is one to go in the back. This is just a single 300 barrier. It has a base rubber seal and the top with the brackets to help tighten it down. So that's one board for the back. Here are the 2 side rails that we have with the compression bolts at the top, and they send out the packers separately with these flood protection barriers. We also need the neoprene gasket, but we'll show that when we actually come to install them. We also have here barriers for another of the openings. These are 400mm high, so there are 2. That's the base with the big thick rubber on the bottom, and then again that's the top board that sits on the top and then tightens down. You'll notice as well the advertising sticker, but more importantly it's the QR code. If you ever get to a situation where you've forgotten how to put them in, click onto the QR code and it'll take you straight to the link to show you how to install the barriers in the event of a flood. So here are some of the tools that you need to put the base rail in, or the tools that I use. Obviously the most important, the spirit level, and then a series of different trowels to get the mortar into the right place, and you will need either a mallet or a hammer to tap the aluminium base rail into the wet concrete mortar. Obviously with this install here we've put shuttering in because the ground has already been taken away for us, but again if you're doing it into a patio, a driveway, often you'll need to cut out that channel to allow the aluminium base rail to go in. So you're going to need an angle grinder or a steel saw, and then some sort of brake to break away the concrete, if it's concrete tarmac that you're chopping out.
Whilst we're at this installation job, I thought I'd talk you through a few of the different products that we use and you might want to use if you're installing yourself. So the first one you'll have seen Anton, our installer, using. It's a product called M90, which is used to set the ground strip in. Now it's only suitable for depths between 10 and 75 millimeters. So you wouldn't use it for, say, setting in a demountable post where you'd want a concrete mix. This is for setting a ground strip. And the reason it's called M90 is it's effectively 90 minutes. You can also get M60, which goes off even quicker, 60 minutes. And it's supposed to be open for traffic after 90 minutes. So if you were relaying a manhole lid, it's a really popular product. The great thing about using a ready mixed concrete like this, a rapid set mortar, is it's going to be more or less the same everywhere you use it. You're not going to get variations in sand, variations in finish. So it's a predictable product to use. And for us, it allows us to put the ground rail in and then it goes off quickly so we can add the rails on the wall afterwards. But it is more expensive than if you were using a normal sand and cement mix. So you won't find everybody uses it, but we do like to use it for the ground strips. I'll also talk you through the silicone sealants that you can use for the rails. So a couple of popular ones are either CT1 or HA6. These are useful for sealing around the rail as that gets attached to the wall, just to make sure it's fully sealed and water doesn't get behind it. So they're two popular ones there. Now, when it comes to screws, a lot of people will think, well, a screw's a screw. But you've got to think about the environment that you're using the screw in. This is going to be left outside and also touching the aluminium rail. So you want to think about how do they interact. You also don't want anything too brittle or too soft. A screw we often use is from Spax, and it has a coating that stops it from corroding as well, which means if you ever wanted to take it out in the future, it's easier to work with and lasts better outside. So that's the Spax Wyrox. It has a corrosion resistant coating. And then when you're attaching the rail onto the wall, which is what you'd use those screws for, you obviously need to put a rawl plug in the wall, and this is for not going to be the same for every single installation, because depending what you fit to depends on what you might need. So you might need a different screw, you might need a different rawl plug, but one of the popular ones is this Fisher Duo Power, and again, just make sure that what you are actually attaching into and for the height of the barrier you're using, that these fittings are suitable, but these are popular ones. And finally, when we're doing the installation, we like to supply a little toolbox, which inside will include the barrier parts. And in here, it's good to include a silicone spray just for maintenance over time of the seals and any components, so that they stand the test of time, and when you're ready to deploy, everything's in one easy place to find, and you can get your barriers installed quickly ahead of any flood.
The idea with putting the base rail in, firstly, is to allow the bottom seal of the barrier to fit on something that is flat and level, and also when you're putting it into an install into a driveway in front of a house, you want as level a surface as you can get so it doesn't form a trip hazard. I've already set up some shuttering onto this prepared footing. This is a low height flood wall. It's not quite finished. They are going to render it when it's been done. So I put some shuttering to allow us to set in a base rail. It's 50mm thick because we know that the foundation is at least 1/2 metre thick, 500mm. So that will take the weight. We're going to cast this in using a product we call M90 by Ultracrete. It's a rapid set, hard strength, ready mix mortar. People often ask why there are holes in the side of the base rail. This is to allow the mortar or the concrete that you're setting this into to get fully underneath the actual channel and hold that into one solid unit. So there are no air pockets underneath the base rail. So the base rail will fit in between the shuttering. You've got to make sure your base rail does fit before you set out and start mixing your mortar mix. This one you may think is a bit short, but it isn't, because this setup here is going to have a packing rail to the two side rails or reveal fix that this barrier is going to have. Hi, so I'm now ready to concrete this base rail in. The product I'm using is the M90 Ultracrete. I've got my paddle mixer ready, my bucket to mixing, and the water and the product. If you do use this product, I will give you a warning, it goes off very, very quickly. So your working life is 5 to 10 minutes maximum. You can use a wash sand or ballast and cement mix. I'd always put something like an SBR in it, an additive or waterproof additive, but you will need a minimum of 24 hours for it to dry before you can put the side rails on. So basically allow any barrier, it's almost a 2-day job. You need to let the base rail harden and set before you put the side rails on. I sometimes use SBR as well to prime surfaces if I think it's going to draw the moisture out too quickly. So now putting the base rail in, making sure it's where I need it to be in the wall, which it's there. Going to use my mallet now to tap this into the mortar. Now you can see why we need the holes in the side as we're tapping that down. And checking with the level, you can see already, look, one side looks low, and there we go. So that's level. We can now start to finish it off with trowels. At the moment I'm cleaning off the aluminium base rail. You're bound to get concrete mortar onto it, so while it's still wet, just clean that off so you are achieving what you set out, a perfectly flat and level aluminium base rail that's been set into, in this case, M90 mortar, rapid set mortar. Just slow and steady this little bit to keep it as neat as you want it. So that base rail is now concreted in. We'll leave that overnight for it to harden up before we put the side rails in. Remembering that if you are using M90, M60, any of the rapid set products, you do need to clean the tools pretty quickly, otherwise you'll be stuck with very dirty trowels. So each of these side rails comes with a neoprene gasket that needs to go underneath when you install the side rails to the corresponding wall. They come oversized so that you can cut them down. If you leave them too long, they could flap and eventually lift and cause water ingress. So I always put them on, mark round them with a pen like that. And now I can cut that neoprene gasket to suit, knowing that it's going to fit underneath the packer and the side rail. This neoprene makes sure that you've got a seal underneath the aluminium, otherwise your aluminium's touching the floor or on top of your base rail, which can allow water ingress. So it's just another seal similar to the ones that you've got actually on the boards. So making sure you put the right rail on the right side. Where are you going to deploy this barrier and how are you going to deploy it, and which side of the wall you're trying to protect? So the weight of the water is coming from the garden onto the patio here. So we need to make sure that the seal is using positive hydrostatic pressure. The weight of the water will help push the barrier onto the seal at the back. If we did it on the other side, it's trying to push the barrier away from the seal. So just remember which side you're doing, left hand, right hand, and where the water is facing. In this install, because this wall is going to be rendered, we recommended that the client had a packer behind it. The render, being 15mm thick, would have been too close to the side to be able to tighten the barrier into position. So when we install this, this will have a packer bringing it in off the reveal block work, making it able, the client to be able to tighten this in when they come to deploy the barrier. Okay, we've cut the neoprene gasket for the bottom already. Again, dry fixed at the moment. Just place it down. Make sure it's central to the base rail, and then I will then plumb it up like so. I can then mark the wall so I know where it's going to. This one is being rendered, so you're not going to see that pencil line. Knowing that the central rail, the main, will fit plumb because the screw holes are all ready to line through. So while that's in position, I can pilot these holes into the masonry. So they're piloted through. Remove the gasket. I normally use a bit of packaging underneath just to collect the dust. Before I drill it with the main drill bit. Raw plugs ready to go in. I quite like using these made by Fisher. They seem to grab hold a little bit more. So we'll knock those into place. Make sure you've cleaned all the debris off as well prior to putting those in and sealing everything in. I tap those through from there. You can use any raw plug really, but they're the ones I prefer. Screws, right. Generally, when fitting a single side rail, I would use a 50mm screw. But because we have the packer as well, I'm now going to increase that size up to a 70 or 80mm screw so that I know it's going to get hold and into the appropriate raw plug. Okay, I'm going to apply some of the silicone now. I always apply it to the wall and to the back of the side rail, and obviously with this one the compression post at the packing rail as well. So I always apply it, and the silicone that we like to use is a CT1. It's a tribrid mastic, sort of seems to do a little bit of everything. Right, apply that to there, and then I'll show you in a moment putting the actual side rail and packer on. Applying the CT1 mastic to the back of the first packing. Make sure it's all the way down. I even put a little bit on the bottom from there. That fits on there. Now again onto the back of the rail. Doesn't need a lot because it's aluminium to aluminium, and we'll go down the sides of it as well when we've finished to make sure it's all beaded up well. So we can line those screws straight through and into the plug. I like to, if I can, just tap it a little bit. Now we plumbed it up left to right, front and backwards. We also need to make sure it's plumb in that elevation as well. Actually, that's pretty good as it is. If it does need packing off, I always use plastic shims just to make sure that that's plumb all the way round. Just going to seal around the outside, although this one, because it's being rendered, I'm not going to do a huge amount, but just enough to seal around the edge. Both inside and out is always good practice. Obviously you don't need to do where the gasket is. Making sure we know there's mastic behind it. We know the neoprene gasket has got it underneath. We just do the along the side there. I'm sure there's a tool for this, but side rails in, ready for deployment. Before we do that, and in your toolkit or toolbox, it's always good to get a can of silicone lubricant. Don't use the bog standard oil, the I might as well name it the WD-40. WD-40 do a silicone spray. The silicone one is the one you want. It won't rot or degrade the rubbers. So when I've done that, before I deploy anything, I always spray the seal. just quick spray of lubricant from there. It's good for maintenance and it helps to get the barrier in place. Installation is now complete. Base rail all concreted in, side rails with appropriate mastic and fixings into the blockwork. So just to test that this one fits in, again, locate it and lower it down gently into the right place. That fits nicely. Top compression bolts go in one either side. It doesn't matter which way round they go. There's not a left and there's not a right. They just push in there like that. Supplied with the product is one Allen key. One size fits all. That does everything. There is a video later to show everybody how to deploy your barriers, but it's very simple. Finger tight first, push it down, and then the front, and then tighten it up with the Allen key.